How's it going, everybody? TK here from Genesis Barbell, once again bringing you another video, and today we are going to tackle how to set up a basic program. Now, tackling this, we'll be looking at all the general aspects and the step-by-step guide as to how I start setting up a block. All the more detailed aspects I cover in different videos where we go a little bit more in depth. This video is just to show you the setup, how I practically go about putting together a program for an athlete that comes to me for the first time. So check it out. I really think it's going to be informative. All right, so let's get into how I would write a basic program. Now, I'm going to disclaim for a moment. Everything I'm going to be showing you will be pretty much how I would set up a completely new athlete, an athlete that's coming to me for the first time. I've got no idea what works for them, what doesn't work for them, how their body will respond to whatever I give them. So everything that is entailed in this video will be the theory, the theoretical aspect to programming. And obviously, as we know, once we start taking an athlete, whether that's yourself or someone you're coaching, through training blocks, you will start to pick up some things. Maybe you respond better to a little bit lower volume than the theory suggests, maybe a little bit higher intensity for certain lifts, maybe certain rep ranges. It really depends on the person, and that comes with the experience of coaching this athlete or training yourself, whoever it may be, yourself or the athlete that you're coaching. So that comes with experience and going through the anecdotal exposures, right? So everything in this video will be the theoretical aspect. And so it's going to be pretty much baseline units. But I'm going to take you through everything step by step. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail, but I will give a couple of nuggets here and there to help you just get a better idea of how we're going to put together this first program. Okay, so what we've got in front over here is just the basic template. So this is what all my programs look like. We've got, just to orientate yourself, there's obviously week one. Now we're going to do I'm going to show you step by step how to do it, but what I start off with is one template, okay, for the first week, and I put in all of the variables that are pretty much consistent from week to week. So you'll see I'm going to throw in all the exercises, okay, and from week to week they will remain the same. We're not going to change necessarily exercises going from week to week. So those variables will be the same from week to week, possibly in certain blocks. The amount of sets will be the same, others it will change. Rep ranges will pretty much usually be the same unless it's for the main lifts. So I'm going to be putting in everything that remains the same, and then we basically copy and paste. And then all the variables that do change will fill in separately. Okay, so this is just going to be the first sheet, right? So let me start off the very first thing that I do. Okay, so we're going to take it back all the way here to volume. Okay, so let's say the individual comes to me, and I'm gonna have to use one particular example, right? And I'm going to use the example that's the most comfortable for me to program for. It's the example that, or it's the type of person that I find most frequently comes to me, and that is a male, roughly about 90 to 100 kilos body weight, that's been training for a couple of years, maybe done a few competitions, relatively strong. And so we're going to use these lifestyle factors for this example, right? So we're going to start off with a volume. How much volume can they tolerate? How much can they recover from? And what's going to be a good amount to make progressions? So for this volume, okay, we've got multiple aspects here. Okay, during our higher volume phases, this will be the landmarks. These are ranges, right? Okay, so 10 to 16 sets, 13 to 18 sets, 6 to 9 sets. Okay, so these are overloading sets per week. These do not take into account accessories. These are the main lifts and variations, the ones that we overloading on for the competitive sport. Okay. Then for our general strength blocks, which is what I'm going to be setting up here, is 7 to 13 sets, 10 to 15, 4 to 7, and then a peaking block, also the volume landmarks, right? So for the strength block that I'm setting up, it's going to be within these ranges. Now you'll see when let me move my face here, you'll see when I calculate the theoretical basic standard idea of how much volume this person can tolerate, that's going to filter somewhat arbitrarily into these ranges, and I'll show you how I do that. So we have a male. Again, I just highlighted these already. We've got a male, medium body weight, 90 kilos I would say is roughly medium. Okay, let's say the height is relatively tall, maybe 1.8 meters tall. Strength is pretty high compared to the general powerlifting population. Experience intermediate, a couple of years into it, in their 20s. So I'm just giving the usual person that comes to me. I'm using that as an example just because I'm used to it. It's going to be easiest for me to explain. Sleep, let's say average 6 to 7 hours per night consistently. Diet, let's say, is really good. Tracking macros, tracking calories and whatnot. Good micronutrient intake. Good quality foods. Meals spread out throughout the day. High carbohydrate, high protein intake. Okay. For this, I mean, this sometimes is tricky, right? So average, I would say, is going to be someone that's a little bit more lenient, not really tracking everything, and not really being too particular with the food sources, etc., etc. Keep in mind a calorie deficit, depending on how big the deficit is. If the person is really, really strict on everything that they're eating, good meal timing, good macros, good micros, all of those things, I will put a calorie deficit in those variables around average. But usually a calorie deficit for most people will be leaning towards poor, just because the caloric intake is low and not sufficient. So stress, let's say, is average, not really a desk job, but not really a high labor job, somewhere in between. Let's say natural athlete, no PEDs. Let's say average recovery. This thing, recovery, is pretty much just previous exposure. A person that's been exposed to all kinds of sport and athletic activity all their life and kind of built up that tolerance to high activity will lean towards good or even exceptional recovery. A person that's been a couch potato all their life will lean towards poor, but most people will sit around average. And this is kind of the arbitrary one. So this is usually the one that's going to determine how things change volume-wise from person to person. Meaning after a couple of training blocks, you will start to notice, okay, well, how good is their recovery? Sometimes it leans to good, sometimes it leans to low. So with all of that out the way, I've highlighted all the things that are necessary for this individual. And now we start to quantify some sort of edge. Okay, so we, for this person, okay, these are overloading sets. Okay, it's not really quantifiable, and I'll show you how I utilize this. But let's just start counting here. Okay, so we've got 0 mark, 0 mark, and we've got a -1, -2, +2, so that'll be a net of 0, +1, 0, okay, a net of +2. So we just add and subtract here. So he's got a net of +2, right? And so when we look at this massive range here where it can go up to like +5 or -5, we've got lots of aspects that can lean us towards each side. And +2 isn't much. It's a very slight lean, a very slight edge. If it was a female that was light, short, low strength, intermediate, teenager, good sleep, good diet, low stress, on PEDs and exceptional recovery, I mean, that will add up to a significant amount in terms of the quantity over here, which will lean us very much to the higher volume end. So a net of +2 is a very, very small change. And so I'm not actually going to take, so typically what you would think is I'll take the mean of these ranges, so 10 sets here, 12, 13 year, and 5 or 6 year, take the mean and add 2. But that's not really what I'm going to be doing, okay? Because most people, if not all people, would usually stay within this range. So almost no one that I know will need to do 14 sets or 6 sets for the squat in a strength block, or 16 sets or 9 sets for bench in a strength block. They'll usually always stay within this range. So whatever net number you gain here is just going to be an arbitrary idea of which side of the range to lean to. And a net of +2 is going to be a very slight edge towards the right or towards higher volume. So over here we've got 10 as the mean, and I'm going to stick with that. That seems like the appropriate choice. Over here it's either 12 or 13, or technically it's 12 and a half. And so with a slight edge to higher volume, I'll pick 13 sets. Okay, and over here it's 5.5, I'll edge towards 6. So we've got 10 sets, 10 overloading sets of squats per week, 13 overloading sets of bench per week, and 6 overloading sets of deadlift per week. Very simple, very standard, basic, general idea of how much they could potentially handle and do well in terms of volume. Now we look at frequency. This is the second thing. So I'm going to start highlighting these. Once again, we've got male, medium weight, let's say relatively tall, strength is high, intermediate, in their 20s, average sleep, good diet, average stress, no PEDs, and average recovery. Okay, this is also very arbitrary. Okay, so everything that we calculate here, because this is all theory, right? Everything from the volume and the frequency, all this little systems that you see here is not my thinking or my experience. It's the experience and like research. And when I say research, it's just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of athletes that have been kind of not studied, but kind of looked at, and coaches that have had 20 years of experience plus or whatever have noticed where certain athletes will typically lean towards in terms of volume and frequency. That's all this is. It's practical research. It's just looking at athletes over the course of years and years and years and years and seeing which dots connect and seeing what people will lean towards. So this is not my own personal system. This is a system that's been put together from hundreds and thousands of athletes that coaches have kind of studied, okay, in person and worked with. Okay, so over here, this is going to be very arbitrary once again. So this is basically just where are we leaning to. You can see the kind of, what's the word? I don't even know what the word is. But where all the reds are situated, we're leaning towards this area over here. So let's say what I like to do is I like to draw a line in the middle. I can't really do that here, but I like to draw a line in the middle and I see how many edges towards each side. So we've got 2 here, 1, 1, 1. So that's 7 total on this end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on this end. So if we're drawing a line down the middle here, we're leaning towards this side. So 2 squat sessions a week, 2 to 3 bench sessions a week, and possibly 2 deadlift sessions a week. So what am I going to do here if it's in between 2? Okay, so we've got a standard 2 squat days a week. For bench, it's either 2 or 3, sometimes 2 and like a very low specificity third bench day, which is probably what I'm going to do here. And then for deadlift, almost like kind of leaning towards 2, but could possibly only recover from 1. So what am I going to do here? Well, I'll again have a high intensity or high volume normal deadlift day. And the second day will be very low specificity, very low intensity, very low volume. So kind of like we sometimes refer to it as a half session, where we're getting some stimulus, but not enough to cause us any significant fatigue. Okay. So in terms of frequency, we've got, I'm actually not going to write this down. We'll remember it. 2 sets of squats, 2 squat sessions, 2 main bench sessions, and a third low specificity one, 1 main deadlift session, and a second low specificity one. Okay, so that's that for volume and frequency. Then the phases, I'm not really going to go into a big thing here. There's multiple things that we can talk about. I'm just going to do a standard strength block. Okay, it's going to be an S1. I'm not really going to go into too much detail here, but typically we've got the general rep range of 3 to 6 reps per set, where it's going to be very high overloading work, but not too much where we're not getting enough skill practice or exposure to certain loads, and not too high load exposure that we're going to get way too tapped. We're getting general strength training done with our main lifts and variations, working within this appropriate percentage range of 70 to 85%. The rest you don't really have to worry about, but that's going to be our general strength block, right? So let's move on from there. I'm not going to touch on models or variations. Kind of just keep an open mind. Then this is my little special place where I figure out very, very complicated frequencies. So let me move my face once again. So this little block right here is where I would typically calculate frequencies. It's usually not necessary in this case where it's 2 squat days, 2.5 bench days, and 1.5 deadlift days. But when we're getting to like female athletes that need to squat 3 times a week, bench 4 times a week, and deadlift twice a week, it can get very complicated. So I need to juggle around frequencies to see which one is going to be the most appropriate in terms of fatigue management, what we can recover from. But this is going to be very easy, very standard. So let's put a general layout over here. So we've got, say, a squat day on a Monday, and a main deadlift day on a Friday, and a main bench day on a Saturday. If you know me and know my athletes, a lot of my, if not all of my male 90 to 100 kilo athletes that have pretty decent experience and are pretty damn strong, this is their setup. They've got their main squat day on a Monday, main deadlift day on a Friday, and main bench day on a Saturday. That's just how I set it up. Sometimes I've got athletes that are like, yeah, Saturdays I can't do this or whatever, or I prefer to train Sunday. Doesn't really matter. I swap things around to fit their schedule, but this is usually the best little setup that I can get for them. So we've got 2 main bench days. So the secondary bench day will be on the Tuesday, and the tertiary bench day will be on the Thursday. Okay. Then secondary squat day will be on the Friday, and secondary deadlift day will be on the Monday. Why do I do this? Because I can go, and this is what most beginners do, is or people that are not really too much exposed to powerlifting just yet, is they separate the squat and deadlift days. They'll possibly go squat, deadlift, deadlift, bench. I don't even know how you would fit all your training in, because no one's going to train 7 days a week, but they like to split all of their days or all of their main lifts. I do not like that. I put lower body movements together. I think that is the best bang for your buck in terms of recovery. You'll be able to get a whole lot more work done, a whole lot more recovery, and you don't have to worry about your back going into a squat session, or about your adductors or whatever going into a deadlift session, or even your back going into deadlift sessions. Sometimes squats can stuff your back up. Really don't have to worry about that. We do both of them in session together. No issues whatsoever. Okay, so this is pretty much the general setup for most of my male 90 to 100 kilo strong athletes, including myself. This is what I do. For me, sometimes I only have 2 bench days a week. Sometimes that's the most I can recover from, but usually it looks like this. So we're going to go for this person, okay? And now we look at what kind of variations, and I go straight to my program, my template over here, and this is where we start. Now, the trick is I can't really right now look at a very particular athlete and actually take you through how I would determine variations for this person. But I'm going to keep it very standard, and I'm going to give you just I'm going to share a little bit of my imagination with you. So let's say this person, wait, let me put in the main lifts first and then we go through the variations. So we've got day 1 to day 6 here, with the 7th day off, a rest day. And we know that the 3rd day is also going to be a rest day. So we are going to, goodness, why is this thing being so stubborn? Okay, we are going to remove, goodness, I'm so sorry. I don't know why Excel is being so strange. We're going to remove and add in a rest day on day 3. Okay, now we have got, goodness gracious. Okay, we have got, I've got a little toggle on the side here for the video recording, and anything in the same line as it does not allow me to click. All right, so let's put in our main squat, our main bench. Oh my goodness. And my main deadlift day. Okay, I don't have to do any more than that. That sets out the layout for me already. That's our main work. Now, for the most part, we're going to have a top set and a back down. So I'm going to leave that second space open. For the squat, okay, we would like at least 2 variations. So we'll have a variation on the main squat day, because no one wants to do, I mean, how many sets of squats does this guy have? 10 sets? Okay, no one wants to do, say, 6 sets on our primary day, which will usually be the case, 5 or 6 sets, given that we've only got 2 days where we squat. No one wants to do 6 sets of low bar competition squat. That's a little bit too much on the back, a little bit too much load exposure. We want a variation on the primary day as well. So what is a nice one that I like to give here? Well, possibly a high bar, just because now I'm being very general here. It can really be literally any variation that exists, okay, depending on what the individual needs. I'm just going to give you some examples here. And a very common example that I find is a high bar. The reason why is because a high bar will take some load off the back and potentially take some load off the bar as well, most likely. So that's exactly what we want here if we're just looking for variation for fatigue management. Obviously, that's not always the case. We want variations for other things, but let's say this particular person has got weaker quads, got a bit of a stronger posterior chain adductors, whatnot for the squat, and we want to throw in something that's a little bit higher demand on the quads. So we've got our high bar. Okay, nice and easy. So we've got a top set, and that will stay the same. So we throw in that variable. We've got a top set, and we'll calculate how many sets he's got left here. Okay. Then for the secondary squat, so we're going to leave a couple slides open here. I'll show you why. For our secondary squat, let's say something, again, very basic and casual, a safety bar. Or let's say, make it interesting, let's say a pause safety bar squat. Okay, so I'm not really going to give much reason for the variations that I pick. I'm just going to throw them in. Let's say this person needs a pause safety bar squat for, say, upper back tightness, tightness in the whole, brace, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm not really going to go for the reasoning behind it. That's for you to decide, whatever you or your athlete needs. I can't determine that for you, unfortunately. So let's say a pause safety bar squat, a lot of load off of the bar in comparison to a competition squat. So nice little variation there. Okay, and that's that. Those are our main squat and variations. Okay, now let's put in the sets. So he's got 10 sets total, and for a strength block, that's going to stay consistent. Why? Well, we're going to do a lot of overloading in terms of the weight on the bar, because typically reps will start off a little bit higher and very standardized. You know, it'll go down over the course of the block, and we're not really going to push volume. It's not the aspect that we're pushing intensity, right? And load exposure and skill practice. So there's no reason for us to increase volume. So it's going to stay at 10 throughout the entire block. That's all we need. Accessories, if we want some growth for particular muscle groups, which I'll throw in here. We're going to have some hypertrophy aspects in here as well, just to give you an idea of how that will work as well. So we're going to mix the two slightly, just to give you more information. But we're going to possibly push the volume for the accessories. That's going to be great because accessories are pretty much mostly there for local hypertrophy and neurological improvements. So we're going to push the volume there, but not on the main lifts. Okay, so we've got 10 total sets. So how would we split this up? Well, a top set on squat, 2 back down sets is great skill practice. It's enough exposure, and 3 high bars. Okay, that splits 3 on competition squat, 3 on high bar, saves the back a lot, saves us from a lot of fatigue. That's a beautiful way to set it up. Okay, then we've got 4 sets left to make up 10 for the total amount of overloading sets that he's going to be doing. So we've got a top set on core safety bar and 3 back downs. Okay, that fills up all of our volume needs. What you can possibly do here, what I like to do sometimes is give a intra-session translation, meaning we'll have a paused whatever squat as a top set and then normal ones without the pause as our back downs. That way we gain the paused exposure for the first set, and then intra-session, meaning throughout the same session we take that exposure to the pause and we utilize that within our, and translate that within our normal, in this case, safety bar squat. And so we get 1 set's exposure in the paused and then take that into our normal sets for our back downs. And so we kind of can literally feel the translation from the pause into normal. Okay, so that's a nice little thing. And that's basically it. Okay, reps we'll do separately. This is all the variables that don't change that we're doing now. So that's that for squat. Okay, now what do we do for deadlifts? Well, we've got our primary day where same thing. We'll have a main variation, and the second variation on the secondary day is going to be very, very low specificity. Once again, you won't recover from 2 heavy deadlift sessions a week, so the second session will be like very low specificity. So something like and when I say very low specificity, literally anything, and this is a very different way of looking at it. Any variables that you change within a lift will cause it to be less specific to the main lift, obviously. But another way of looking at it is whatever variables will cause more weight off the bar that we need to strip off, that's going to make it less specific as well. So something like a barbell row is going to be the least specific movement. I'm not really too fond of them, so I'm not going to throw them in here, even though they can work sometimes. But I will pick something that's going to be very light. Even though it's just as challenging, it's going to be very low weight on the bar compared to the normal deadlift. So something like we'll go all out here, is a beltless deficit stiff-legged deadlift. Okay, if you know me, you know that I love these in general, but they are very low specificity and very challenging still. So not a lot of weight on the bar, but definitely a very nice one. This just taxes our entire posterior chain to the max. Beltless aspect, a lot more demand on the back, obviously, and the brace. Deficit, more hip hinge, maybe some slight back rounding for more demand there, and the stiff-legged for more demand on the hamstrings. Okay, and obviously the stiff-legged will cause your torso to be a lot more parallel to the floor, which is again more demand on the back. So beautiful little variation here. But let's look at our main variation. Before we do that, I like cluster deadlifts. The reason I like cluster deadlifts, if you know me, once again, I like cluster deadlifts because they are more specific to the competition deadlift than a normal deadlift set. And the reason why I say that is because if you think about it, when you do a competition deadlift in competition, that one single that you're doing, you're starting with the concentric. There is no eccentric before going into the concentric, right? You don't put the bar down and then pick it up. You just grab it off the floor and go. And so when we're thinking about doing deadlifts in training, if we're doing a set of, say, 3 reps, okay, the first set is straight off the floor, just like competition. But the second and third rep both have an eccentric portion before you pull again. So when you put the first rep down, that is the eccentric portion before you start the second rep. Okay, that eccentric portion might give you an edge in terms of the stretch reflex, and so we want to take that stretch reflex away that lasts about 4 or 5 seconds by doing cluster deadlifts. Even just 10 seconds between each rep is going to be a good cluster to do. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to do, say, 10 singles. Okay, how many singles you do is going to be very tricky. I'm not going to go into how to set up the time and everything else that goes into cluster deadlifts. I'm just going to give you a general aspect. 10 singles with weight that you would do for triples. Okay, that will count for 3 total sets. The reason I add an extra rep, okay, so obviously 9 singles will equate to 3 sets of 3 basically, if we're using that same weight. I add in a single just because of the rest time. The rest time gives us a little bit of an edge, allows us to go a little bit more. I'm not going to go into the details with that, but a 1 minute rest period between reps, 10 singles with the weight that we would do triples with is going to be good. Okay, very standard, very, very basic, very standard. Okay, then our main variation is going to be, I don't know. Let's think. Well, we've got a range to pick from, but let's say this person really needs to, I can really just thumb suck anything here, but let's just say a deficit deadlift. I do like every now and again, sometimes this is exactly what I do. I give at least one set per block or per week on the deadlift that's a straight set, because yes, even though the stretch reflex can help us, that's maybe something that we want, maybe not for the competition deadlift, but maybe for the variations. And the reason why I say that is because if we do one set of 5 with clustered with a little bit of a break in between reps, we might not be able to do as much weight or as many reps as if it was a straight set. Okay, and that's obviously the goal with a cluster, is to be more specific. But in terms of a variation here, a straight set that we want to do, if we have the stretch reflex helping us move more weight, sometimes the goal is to move more weight. Sometimes the goal is to do more reps. And so if we have something like the stretch reflex to help us do that, why not? We'll get more gains, we'll get more force production, we'll get more motor unit recruitment from that. Sometimes we want to make use and take advantage of those aspects. Again, for the main work, we want to be very close to competition specific, so we'll probably stay away from those sets for the most part. But for something like a deficit deadlift back down set, we can definitely make use of that aspect. So maybe if we do literally just one back down set on deficit deadlifts will be good. So we've got 3 sets here, or the cluster equates to 3 sets. And then we've got an extra set here, that's 4 sets. We're doing 6 sets total for this person's deadlift per week. So we've got 2 sets left, and we throw that into the variation here. 2 sets, very, very little volume for deadlifts on the secondary day. Again, it's more like a half a day, very low fatigue, and just enough stimulus to have some sort of benefit. Okay, so that's that. Now let's look at the bench. Okay. All right, so the bench. We've got a main bench day, and then let's say, for example, a very, very standard secondary bench will be something like a close grip bench press. You can't really ever go wrong with a close grip bench unless your bench is already very close. Again, I'm not going to give any reasoning, maybe just extra shoulder and possibly tricep, depending on how you do the close grip bench, but usually it's just more shoulder engagement or demand. So close grip for that, and then our very, very tertiary day, again, more like a half day, we'll do something like a inclined dumbbell press. Is more of an accessory. Some people think of it as an accessory, some people think of it as a variation. I like to think of it as kind of a mixture. It's a press, and even though it's not with a barbell, it's still a horizontal or slightly inclined press that involves all the same muscle groups that you would in the bench. I would say it's in between the two, but we can definitely utilize it as a tertiary bench variation, right? So we're throwing that in there, and now we've got our 3 days. But because we typically have more volume for the bench, we can add an extra variation. So I will throw that variation on the main bench day just because we've got more days to recover from before our next bench session. We'd want to have an extra variation just because we do have more volume to work with. And so instead of just doing more sets on each variation, we'll just add in a variation to get some extra work in. So for the main variation, let's say a Larsen press. Okay. So for the Larsen, just basically a feet up or feet in front of you press. Takes the leg drive out of it, reduces weight on the bar, again, just fatigue management as well, and forces us or puts high demand on us staying tight, especially our upper back throughout the lift. Okay, so that's very nice. That's all of our bench, and we've got a top set here for each one. I'm going to do something nice and special for the incline bench or incline dumbbell press, sorry. Top set here, and then same thing here, we'll just throw in volumes. So let me just do this first. I'll explain all of this just now. We're going to do a lacquer little monster set over here. Okay, I'll explain that just now. But let's put in the volume for the other days so long. The incline bench, I'm going to explain this now, but it's going to count for 3 sets. And how many sets do we have here? We've got 13 sets total this week for the bench. So 3 sets on this day will subtract, so we've got 10 sets left, right? So close grip bench, how would we spread this out evenly? Okay, we don't just want to take each variation and go and split it evenly, so like 3-3-3 or whatever. Just because we've got 2 variations on this day doesn't mean we want to do a whole lot more volume. So doing something like 5 total sets on that day and 5 total sets on this day. It's going to be a better little spread. You could possibly go 4 total sets on that day and 6 here. That might be, it really doesn't matter depending on what the person can recover from. That might just be fine actually. So 4 sets here, 3 sets there, and 6 sets here. That's 13 total sets. And there our volume is done, right? Let me explain this one quick. I'm not going to do monster set for all the accessories. In fact, I'm not really going to do very particular accessories. I'm just going to tell you what to think of. I typically do a whole lot of monster sets for my accessory work just because it's a lot less fatigue or systemic fatigue in general, so it really helps. This one, I'll do that for this reason and explain to you exactly how it works. If you don't know anything about monster sets, go look at my video where I explain everything regarding them, and you'll have a much better idea. So I'm not going to explain them here, but basically we've got the monster set of 10 to 15 reps. Why such a high rep range if it's a variation for the bench? Well, any sort of dumbbell press is a lot more demand on stability, and when our reps are low and the weight is high, okay, that 6th or 7th rep that you do and fail on might not be failure because of the muscles involved or even the connective tissue or whatever. It might just be a lack of stability. And so we never want that to be the reason we end a set. Okay, we want to end the set because of the RPE or the effort level of our musculature. And so in this case, especially for something that's close to an accessory, again, definitely want only the musculature to experience that sort of fatigue. And so a higher rep range is going to be fantastic for that because it's just less demand on stability. And when we're going to say 15 reps in the set, we'll usually end the set because of the effort levels of the musculature and not really because of stability. So the muscles will get taxed a lot, just a lot better, if I can put it like that. It's very arbitrary, but it's just when you use less weight, the demand on stability significantly goes down. It's not just linearly, it's like exponentially goes down. So definitely better off doing dumbbell presses, any sort of dumbbell presses with a higher rep range. So that's what we're doing here. We've got a 2-minute rest. We've got 30 total sets here, 30 total reps here. So that's going to make up for 3 sets. Okay, that's your monster set right there.
a lot less fatigue as well because of it. So that's going to be all our main work. Right now, let's get into accessories. First and foremost, what are the most important accessories to do? In terms of powerlifting, we need, let's take a lift by lift. For the squat, okay, we need quads and potentially glutes and adductors, or I would definitely say adductors, potentially glutes, but a lot of the movements that we do for our deadlifts includes a lot of glute work, like the stiff-legged deficits, even the deficit deadlift by itself, a lot of glute work. So we don't necessarily, unless you need bigger glutes particularly, need to do a whole lot of specific glute work, but we definitely need quads and we definitely need adductors. Okay, so we're going to throw in, let's say, a quad accessory here, or let's put the quad accessory there, and an adductor accessory here. Okay, that can be a Copenhagen plank, cable adductions, adduction machine, whatever, Cossack squat. It really is up to you, and up to what's going to be the most appropriate for the individual. Quad accessory, again, up to the individual and what he needs, but like anything from hack squats to like full range of motion lunges or whatever, belt squats, pendulum squats, sissy squats, leg press, what have you. Okay, not a fan of leg extensions unless it's like you need extra volume for hypertrophy. But in a general strength block, I'll almost never put freaking leg extensions. Get that away from me. Don't like them. Anyway, okay. Then when we're talking deadlifts, what do we need? Well, we need a strong back, and we're going to do a whole lot of back work on our upper body days. But we need a strong back. We need obviously strong glutes, but that's really in really high demand already. And we need strong hamstrings. I feel like everyone disregards hamstrings tremendously, and they think they're getting all the hamstring work done from their hinge work, like the RDLs and what have you, and the hyperextensions. Those are all fantastic, but they are not enough. We need a hamstring curl. Why? Well, one of the muscles in the hamstring is only targeted when we have some sort of curl motion happening. So we need a hamstring curl. So I'm not going to say hamstring accessory. I'm going to say hamstring curl. Every single person needs to do a hamstring curl, please. Okay? In every single block that they ever do. Okay, please. Hamstring curls are important. So a hamstring curl, one of my favorites is a Nordic hamstring curl, maybe like with an assist, because they're hard. So maybe like a band attached somewhere, or someone holding onto a band and standing on your feet, whatever. But a Nordic is great. A GHR, glute ham raise is fantastic as well. Normal lying hamstring curls, seated hamstring curls, I'm a big fan of, just because we've got a little bit of hinge throughout, meaning that when we extend the legs, we're already in a hinged position, meaning we're getting most lengthening out of our hamstrings. Love a seated hamstring curl machine. So hamstring machines are great. Single leg hamstring curls are great. You can even use a cable machine to do hamstring curls on a bench. Many options. You've got no excuses. Okay. Even if you don't even have any machines or cables or anything, and you can't do Nordics because you don't have a friend to help you, put on a band around your leg, attach it to a rack, and put a dumbbell between your feet. Like, do hamstring curls. They're important. Okay. That's going to be our accessory there. And that's pretty much done for lower body, right? We don't need any more. And so let's look at the accessories for the bench. So for the bench, okay, what do we need? Well, let me disclaim this. We need to train every single muscle group. That's very important. We don't want muscle atrophy to occur, and every muscle, including your side delts, are necessary for your lifts. Okay, if we think about the bench, okay, which is the upper body lift, right? We need delts to stabilize. We need delts to keep our AC joint nice and rigid during heavy benches. We need strong rotator cuffs to keep our AC joint rigid, to make sure that we maintain good position. So we need all of these muscles. We need biceps for the descent of a bench to control. Think of your biceps as your hamstrings in a squat. Okay, they're not going through any particular lengthening, but you sure as hell need them to maintain position and maintain tightness. They are very important. The biceps are as important in a bench press as your hamstrings are in a squat. Let that ponder a little bit in your head, okay? Absolutely. So we need to train all the muscles, but which ones are the most important in terms of priority directly to the lifts? Okay, well, they are the muscles that are involved mostly. So our back and our triceps and our chest, right? We usually get as much chest training as we need just from our bench, especially when we've got this little variation slash accessory here that is really high demand on the chest. If you really want to, you can throw in, say, a chest movement. I'm not going to throw it in there because we got another dumbbell press 2 days later. But maybe over here we can do a dumbbell fly. Not a dumbbell fly, but any sort of fly movement. Okay, direct chest involvement, maybe even like dips or whatever. I'm just going to leave it as a fly. So we've got that. But the most important ones is back and triceps. Back not only for our bench for stability, but for our deadlift. Okay. You'll never look at a guy or a girl with a massive muscular back and think they are weak. Okay, there's a reason for that. And so we're going to do a lot of back training. We're going to do a lot of tricep training just because obviously the triceps are involved in the bench. Okay, so back training. Okay, we're going to do at least. Let me do this actually. Pull down accessory. Row accessory and pull down accessory. Okay, I usually bias pull downs over rows just because it's more demand during the lengthen portion of the lats, etc. So typically we would want at least 3 back movements in a block because we want a significant amount of sets. We want 15 plus sets, right? I'm not going to go into volume for the accessories. I've got a whole freaking list of like the volume needed for each muscle group, maintenance volume, minimal effective volume, maximum adaptive volume, and maximum recoverable volume for each muscle group. We're not going to go into that. Yeah, just not necessary. You can kind of be anecdotal with how many sets you can recover from per muscle group, but we definitely want roughly around 15 sets per week, if not more. And so more than 5 sets per exercise might just be like too much per exercise, and we just might not get any more returns after 5 sets. 6 sets possibly, but you know, it gets too hectic. So at least 3 movements for back. And again, if we've got 3, we can't really do 1.5 rows and 1.5 pull downs. I'll usually bias pull downs just because it trains the lengthen portion of the lats more. So we've got 2 pull downs and 1 row. Why do I throw in the row in the middle here? Well, because we've got deadlifts the next day. And if our lats are really, really taxed as we go into deadlifts, you are just putting yourself at risk of potentially harming your lats. So something like a row is going to be very demanding on, say, the mid traps and the rhomboids, and maybe some rotator cuff muscles and slightly the lats, but just not as much as a pull down. So we've got the row before our deadlifts. Okay, so that's it for back. Then what else do we have? Well, we've got triceps, and we're going to do at least triceps. We're going to do at least 2 tricep movements, and we do them on these days. Okay. Okay, well, why do I do them on these days and not this day? Well, we don't want them 2 days apart. We don't want them on the day 2 and the day 4. Because it's an accessory, we've got high stimulus for them. So 2 days or 2 days apart might be too much. You might definitely not be recovered after 2 days. So we want to spread them a little bit further apart. Now, what you'll usually notice with this trend is that this 4th day, there's not much we can do because all our movements are spread across day, in this case, day 2 and day 6. What we can throw in here, or this day is probably done. We're not going to throw in any extra there, otherwise it's too much. But what do we have left? Well, we definitely, before I mention anything, when you pick your tricep movements, always pick an overhead. In fact, I would rather have us do no push downs whatsoever, and only overhead. But just for the case of tackling each angle, literally each angle, we've got an overhead and some sort of push down where the upper arm is either overhead or close to the body when we do our extensions. So make sure you utilize both. And if you only can have one tricep accessory, do an overhead. Why? Well, the triceps are lengthened the most when we do an overhead, right? Just because the long head of the tricep comes past the shoulder joint, right? Attaches on the other side. So when we flex our shoulder joint, okay, we're actually lengthening the long head of the triceps. So we want to train that portion. Usually, for the most part, okay, it takes priority, is what I'm saying. So that's that. Then we've got the rest of our body, and usually it's just delts and biceps. So we can potentially do delts here. Yes, no, go away. Delts there, biceps here, and biceps there. That's that. Why do we want 2 bicep and 2 delt days? Well, again, even if we do maintenance volume, okay, it's going to be 8 sets per week. It's all roughly set around there. Biceps will possibly get away with 4 to 6 sets per week, just because all of our back work takes care of some bicep stimulus. But definitely for delts, you need like 4 sets twice a week. Doing 8 sets in one day, not great. So you'll just be way too fatigued for the same exercise after the 4th or 5th set, and just not going to be great stimulus for the last couple. So rather split them. Also will save you from a lot of atrophy that could potentially take place. So that's literally it. That is going to be our training, right? Now when it comes to reps and whatever, okay, again, I usually open up more sheets for each week. So each week will have its own sheet. So let me just copy and paste this once off, just to show you. How did I do this? There we go. Okay. Let me just get this done real quick. So what you'll see is I'm not going to do every single week. I'm pretty much just going to show you the basic. So let me also put in here, I'm not going to do the full thing. I'm just going to give you an idea of how to do it. But we've got obviously our rest times here if necessary, especially for the monster sets. Oh, and the cluster deadlift, which we've got there. Then we've got specs for, say, monster sets or drop sets or whatever. Or like if you're in a, here we go, like for a deficit, how big of a deficit, let's say 3 inches. And then we've got our tempo. The tempo is usually for our bench days. Okay. Okay. And possibly something like a 0 acceleration for whatever. Let's say we do hack squats and we don't want to get that rebound out the hole. We put in a 0 acceleration to make sure that this person does proper training. So that's what the tempo part is for. And if you've got particular tempo lifts like the pause safety bar, okay, that bottom in the hole is 1 second pause, or 1 count pause rather. So we've got the tempos here. Notes is going to be individual based. I literally just put in notes based on what I would personally tell the individual, knowing them, or specific cues or things like that. Okay, but then from each week we'll add in the rest, right? So we're going to add in reps, we're going to add in percentages and RPEs. I'm not going to do every single week, but we'll start off with, say, 6 reps for our top set and 6 for our back down. I'm going to do a couple modalities and give examples. I'm not going to do all of it just because we just don't have time. But literally, let's take a couple examples here. So we want a 3 to 6 rep range. So we're going to start off with, say, sets of 6 and end off in the last week with, say, sets of 3. Okay, very standard progression there. We can do an RPE top set, I would say start off with 7 and end off with 9 or whatever, and we can do a percentage based back down. So whatever weight you picked here, okay, we've got say 97% of top set. Okay, these modalities, I also have a video explaining how I do all of these, so go and watch that one, top set and back down modalities. So I'm not going to explain them, but we can do all kinds of stuff here. Okay, we can do a top triple every week, and the back downs can decrease from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 at the end. Okay, and then a percentage back down. We can do a percentage top set of say 89.2%, and then have like an RPE back down. Again, all these modalities can be explained, but in the other video, but I'm not going to go through all of that. So then you put in your reps and your percentages and your RPEs. Go watch that video. It'll help you set up your top sets and back downs. So that's how you're going to do that. And that's going to be based on demand. Again, I can't tell you. I know for myself, this is just a random example. For myself, I need good load exposure for the squat to prime my technique and to perform well. So I'm possibly going to have like lower reps for my top set that progressively increases from week to week, and like a higher rep back down that decreases over the period of time. Okay, you can also do like a certain percentage. Let's just give a random one like 80 to RP 8. Okay, so you take 80% on the bar, and with each set you take it to an RP 8. Doesn't matter how many reps you get, as long as it gets to the desired RPE. That's a modality also explained in the previous video. Then high bars, for something like this, okay, it's a very low specificity variation, so we can give a rep range and an RPE. Percentage is not really going to be appropriate because we don't know what a 1 rep max is on this thing unless you've been doing it for a couple blocks in a row, or even just 1 block in a row. So we give a rep range with an RPE. Okay, just makes it a little bit more relaxing to go into. You can be very intuitive with it, and you can just feel it out and see what you're capable of with these, and obviously make sure that you push them depending on the RPE. So that can be a potential modality for that. There's not much more to say, right? So you need to go watch that video to know how to set up top sets and back downs. But once you've set up everything, including your accessories, I've got an accessory video as well. Go have a look at that. These are all videos from Advanced Protocol series. Go look at how I set these up, and you'll end up with a fully functional program that you can take into your training or for your client or whatever. I explain how to do, which accessories to do and whatnot. And volume will increase over time. So you might start off with 3 hack squats in your sessions and end up with 6 even, 5 or 6, let's say 5, and take it from there. So we make gains there as well. I would say in terms of, there's just some extra nuggets that I'm throwing out there. We've got heavy load on the quads with our squat work. So pick a higher rep range with less load on your accessory stuff. Adductors, again, usually people don't train adductors, and I take that into consideration. So start off with a very high rep range for the adductors, so it stays safe for the person, and then you work your way from block to block with heavier adductor work. You can even start off with like a Copenhagen, which is literally just an isometric. Great way to start off adductor training for someone who's never done them. Our upper back work, we can go nice and heavy, just because we don't really have rows or pull downs motions in our main lift, so we can push those. Triceps, again, high load on the triceps for our bench press training, so we can do this really high reps and get some great stimulus from that. Delts and biceps, just because they're not delts don't have direct like stimulus with a main lift, so again we can go all kinds of rep ranges, but we prefer to stay on the lower end, just because heavier weight typically holds onto muscle mass better. Biceps get really heavy work from all our rows and pull downs, so that can be a little bit higher rep range and less weight on the bar or machine or whatever. And that just goes through, I mean, I can go through all of these. We've got heavy work on the pecs, so the flies can be also a really high rep ranges, etc., etc., etc. Really depends on the individual, but go watch those videos, go throw in all the modalities here. But that's pretty much how I start setting up, and you'll end up with a block that's fully functional that you can take into your training. So that's that. These are definitely not complete. Let me show you an example of a complete program. And I'll literally pick anyone. Let's pick Astrid for her. Let's not do a peaking block. Let's do a standard. Here we go. This is what your programs will look like in the end. So it can look quite complicated, but we've got lots going on here. And this just looks beautiful to me when it's all cluttered like this. All sorts of information and whatnot. All sorts of different modalities. Looks beautiful. And that's what your program will look like in the end. If you go watch all those videos, take into consideration how I start setting up the block, and you'll see new gains and new PRs in no time. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and that's that for how to set up a basic program.